Gifford here.
And Linda Winter.
And today, as you can see, we are surrounded by pumpkins because we are doing
the stuffed pumpkin template set.
So let's take a look at the materials that we need. Of course, we need our 3 pumpkins. These are fat quarter friendly. We have the large, the medium, and the small. And if you want, you can take one of our metallic markers and highlight those, but it's pretty obvious. Large, medium, small. Of course, we're going to need our Martelli rotary cutter, left or right-handed, whichever works for you. The Martelli mat, our cutting mat. We need a good pair of scissors. We're going to need a needle. Most likely, if you're a cheater like I am, a glue gun might suffice, but a needle, like the doll needle that you might own.
Yeah, and I've got the 5-inch needles here. You can get them longer. Plus, you're still going to need a smaller needle, but you're going to need it because you're going to be, if you're going to be doing the button, you're going to need the long needles.
Absolutely. And you notice we've got a much thicker thread here. So not your normal thread.
Yeah,
you can use your thread, but you're going to be able to do a quicker job, a sturdier job with a heavier weight thread.
Some buttons. You're going to need some buttons for if you're going to do the ones with the buttons on the bottom, because you see I've got a button that's on the bottom of them that kind of pulls it in.
We're going to need some straight pins. We're going to have all kinds of decoration options for you as well.
Thimble if you want to not hurt yourself when you're
Absolutely.
poking it through there. But yeah, all kinds of cool stuff. Show her this.
And then the decorations. So in here, I like to use the pinking shears. I'll show you an option for that. You'll notice these pumpkins, there's no pinking shear, but you'll see that in a few minutes. I like to use some kind of a decorative raffia or rope or string or whatever you've got, twine at home. We pulled out Christmas decorations because these are not just for Thanksgiving, for Halloween, for fall. They're all throughout the winter time as well. I've got a big box of cinnamon sticks that smell wonderful. We'll show you what to do with those. If we look underneath, I went through my stash and pulled out old spools of thread. If you're a wine drinker, the corks work really well as well. I mentioned if you're a cheater, glue guns or the peel-off tape or any of those things, but a hand needle for sure for a couple stitches at least.
Spanish moss, silk flowers, silk leaves.
Just raid
or you
your
could use
stash.
our templates. Yeah.
We've got lots of decorating options, and there's just a ton more. Again, this is another one of those let your creativity go wild and have fun with it. All right, Lisa, you're going to start cutting for us?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a sample of the medium one for us today. I'm going to show you how I put it all together. All right, so I'm going to make one of the medium-sized ones today, and I'm going to show you how I did a fabric stem on here, but we're also going to go over lots of different stem options and decoration options. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I would, cut out my pieces. If you see on my pumpkin here, I have 5 sets on here. So I've got my fabric folded. I've already cut out a couple, and I can be able to cut out 2 sets right here. So I've got my template laid on here, and all I'm going to do is just cut this out. And then I'll have 2 sets done. Now you could go ahead and have your fabric folded so that you have your right sides together. But I'm going to just go ahead and do it this way, and then we'll put them right sides together, and we'll go to the sewing machine and get these sewed. And I'm just following along the edges here. This works very well with the 45 rotary cutter. Even when I was cutting with the smaller one, the 45 works very well with it too. And then to make the stem, I just chose a fabric that I like, and I cut me off a piece, and I did with the fabric. I think I just did about 4 inches wide. This one needs to be ironed, but I think I did, I did 4 inches, and this one needs to be just squared up a little bit, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. I can just trim it off just a little bit, because this is going to be rolled up and then it's going to be glued and sewed in. So if you wanted to have it more of a finish here, what I did was I just ran it through my serger, or you could just do a zigzag stitch. I did a zigzag stitch on one end and all the way down one side. And then what I did from there is I just rolled it up tightly. Well, I take that back. Then after I did that sewed, on the one end that I sewed up one side, I brought it over about a 1/2 inch, and I did a stitch here, and I did a stitch a 1/2 inch in about 5 different places down, like a 1/2 inch stitch. I folded it, wrong sides together, stitched, opened it back up, went over about a 1/2 inch, folded it, did another stitch. And I'll do that at the sewing machine to show you how I made. So it just kind of gives it this look right here. So when it's rolled up, those will be, they just kind of flare out a little bit. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to take these pieces that I just cut and we're going to go to the sew machine. So I've got 2 more wedges to cut. I'm going to place them right sides together, then walk them over to the machine, and I'm going to sew them along this edge right here, along this outer edge. And I'm going to do that on both pieces, taking them right sides together, and then we're going to sew them together, and then we're going to sew them all together. Now, as you can see with this one, I have 5 sides or 5 sets, but you could do this with 4. You could do this with more. You could do it probably with 6, just if you wanted to have a broader, wider pumpkin. If you wanted it to just do it with 4, it'd probably make it a little bit more slimmer pumpkin. And Linda, grab me that one pumpkin. I'm going to show you where you've got to pay attention to something because I've got this big, huge boo-boo here, and I'm going to show it to you because I wasn't wanting to. But you need to pay attention to when you're going to sew it together that you actually get it sewed in the correct orientation. And what I mean by orientation is when you go to sew your pieces together that you got your narrows match with your narrows on top and your wider part on the bottom, so that when you go to sew them together for all these pieces together that you're not actually sewing it like this when you're sewing all of them together, because you're going to end up with something that looks like this. I got 2 of them that are upside down, so that is one wonky pumpkin and I'm not happy with it, and I didn't realize I had done that until I had gone to stuff it. I will unstuff this and probably tear it apart and fix it so that I have all the, the narrows on the top and the wider part of the curve on the bottoms of the pumpkin. So I wanted to show you that it's supposed to look like this, not all wonky. So the first step, once you get all of your pieces cut, and I have this one where it's going to be 5, you're just going to sew, and this is a great project for chain piecing, so you could have all of them and just chain piece all 5 sets together. So I've got my right sides together, and I'm going to sew this, and I think I sew this one at like 1/2 of an inch because there's a lot of stretch. I mean, there's a lot of tension or pull on here when you get it stuffed in here. So I think I'm sewing it, not quite 1/2 inch, but a little bit more than 1/4. And so it's probably 3/8 of an inch is what I'm doing this one at. All right, so let me get this all set up for that. And I'm just going to start at the very top, and I'm just going to sew all the way around, and I'm not even worried about back tacking at this point. The back tacking is going to be when I start sewing all the wedges together. When you got all 5 or how many pieces that you're doing to make the pumpkin, the next step is you need to, this is a large curve that's going all the way around. So I take the time and I clip my curves all the way around, and I'm clipping at about 1/2 of an inch and being sure I not catch my stitch. And if you have some pinking shears, you could also probably go ahead and hit this with some pinking shears, and that would probably do the same thing. But I'm just going ahead and I'm just going to take the time to release that fabric so that when it pops back out, it just lays nice and smooth when you're going to stuff it, not have that wrinkly look to it. I did one without taking this step, and it was just kind of a wrinkly looking pumpkin. So it looks better when you take the time to go ahead and clip your fabric for your curves. And I only do it on this part right here. I didn't do it for when I'm sewing all the pieces together because that's kind of hidden because it's kind of tucked in. And I'll show you that once I get to that point. But just going ahead and clipping this, being careful not to cut my threads, and going about 1/2 inch all the way around. Now when you're doing it in a set of 5, so you're going to attach 2 together, the next step, and then you're going to attach 3, and then you're going to, I find it easier, then you're going to put that 3, attach it to the 5, so, or that 3 attach it to the 2, and then you'll have it all together. All right, so here is the first one. So one of them, when you're doing the 2, go ahead and pop it right side out, and I just take my finger and I just kind of run it along that seam. It's almost like doing a finger pressing, and I'm just pushing it out. So that's nice and pushed out, nice and smooth. Because now I'm going to take the other one, and this is where it's important to make sure that you've got the orientation right. I think what I had done was I attached it to, and I had the wide side up here on the top. So now you're going to put one of the seams, you're going to have it right sides together. So I've got it in the right orientation. This is the narrow, this is the wider. So I'm going to take the one that I just sewn, that I turned right side out, and I'm going to just kind of tuck it into one that's not turned yet. And what I'm doing is I'm now matching up my seam at the top. What I do is kind of nest it in there. Make sure it feels like it's a nested seam. Have it all the way up to the top. And if you want, you could grab a pin here and you could pin that. The next step is now I'm going to line it up all along this edge and all the way down to the bottom. So I'm kind of just tucking this over like I did the top. And I'm going to sew one edge here. But the thing is, I am not starting at the very top. I am coming down about 1 inch. A little bit, maybe just shy of a little bit more than 1 inch, but not quite 1.5 inches. I'm coming down about 1 inch, because what I'm looking to do as I'm putting them together is I need to have a big enough opening as I'm putting them all together so that I can stuff it, because the bottom part is going to be completely sealed when I sew the last 2 pieces, which will be a single piece, onto the 3 that I've sewed together. So I'm just going to sew one edge. And I'm going to start about, like I said, about 1 inch down. I'm going to do a good back tack right here at that starting point. And I'm going to sew all the way down till I get to the other end. And where I'm going to stop is, I'm going to stop when I get to my seam. I do not sew all the way off. I sew till I get to where I see my stitch. So I'm going to stop right there at that stitch right there. And I'll back tack it on there. All right, so I'm going to take this under my machine, got my edges lined up, starting at about 1 inch down. I'm getting to where I'm getting ready to come to that seam. I've kind of got my my 2 seams kind of locked right there, but I'm coming to where I get to that seam or that stitch, and I'm going to stop and back tack right there. Okay, so here is the 2 sewed together. So you're going to repeat that for the next 2, and then you'll have 2 sets of 2 and then an extra one. So then if you're doing one with 5, so then you're going to sew that extra one, the last one, onto one of the sets. And that's what I did, the exact same thing, and that's where I got the 3. So now I've got a 3 and a 2. So I'm going to put, however way is comfortable with you, but just being sure that I've got the narrow side on top and the wide on the bottom, and looking at this one, making sure I've got the orientation right on this one. I'm going to just pick one, and I am going to start right sides together. and line it up just like I did all the others. Nesting my seam at the top, going ahead and placing a pin there because I'm going to do the same thing, start about an inch down, working all the way around, but this time when I get to the bottom, I'm just taking this and lining it up right here because I'm going to sew all the way around. I'm going to go all the way around to here and then come right back up to the other side till I get all the way to the top of the other way and then stop an inch from the top over here. It gets a little fiddly right here, particularly when you're working with the smaller one. Just take your time, making sure you got your orientation of the narrow on top and or whatever side that you're working on first, and work your way around. It'll just ease itself in. Always back tack at the beginning because you're going to put a lot of stress and pull on there when you're filling it. And because the Martelli templates do such a wonderful job cutting and everything is precise and everything is exact, everything just lines up so well. Alright, so I'm coming upon that first seam. So I'm just kind of laying it into the center, knowing that I'm going to sew right over all that bulk. There's a lot of fabrics that's all coming together right there at that point, but I'm going to sew it all the way in. Maybe even go in a little bit more than that 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch just to be sure I catch all those layers. And being sure that you're opening it up all the way so that you're not inadvertently sewing into some of the other blades. I'm just coming up to the top, and then I'll stop an inch from the very top. Pull that needle out. And I have it where it just lined up right there at the very top, so I'm just going to stop when I'm an inch away from it. And then all you gotta do is just flip it out. And I like to open up the bottom, make sure everything is all nice and caught under there, and it is. It's going to be covered up with a button anyway. So this is all 5 pieces all sewed on, and I've got a nice good size opening here for stuffing it, and then you'll be stitching that close. Now this little piece right here is what I would have used for a stem. If I was to do a stem on this one, I'm going to trim this up just a little bit because this is a little longer than what I need. So I'm just going to knock off a piece right here. This was not rocket science on here. You can use a piece of scrap for this. And what I had done was I would have changed my thread to sew this. I would have had this as a dark brown or a black thread, but I would just do a zigzag stitch right here. And this is just to give it kind of a finished look on the edge here. And then I would do it across the top. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that through, and I'm just going to show you what I would have done. Now to get this little decoration that I have that goes around the edges here, I just take my piece and I fold it wrong sides together. Now wrong sides together, that's what I'm doing, wrong sides together. And I fold it in about 1/2 inch. And now I'm just going to zigzag down that edge. See that? And then I'm going to open it up, and then I'm going to fold it over another 1/2 inch or so, wrong sides together, and I'm going to stitch that down too. And I'm going to repeat that about 4 or 5 times. So now I've got 2. Do it again, about 1/2 inch or so. What it's doing is just going to give it a little bit of dimension when you go to roll this up. So there's 1, 2, 3. Let's do one more. So there's the 4. That's right there. So here's what I do. I just kind of take my fabric and I roll it kind of tight. I'm just gathering it and just giving it a tight roll, trying to keep it as even as I can as I'm rolling it. And I would have my hot glue gun on right now because I'm going to be using it right after I get done, because the glue is going to kind of hold it all together. And I would just keep rolling it, keeping it as tight as I can. And I've started where I'm rolling it where the right side is on the outside. Just keep rolling till now I'm getting close to the edge. And as I get to where I sewed those little stitches there, just keep rolling it through. And then at that last one, I just kind of hot glue in. So it just gives it a little dimension to the rolled fabric. And then I would just run a bead of hot glue here and hold it in place, and then put a bead of hot glue. When I get to where I'm using it, I just stuff it down into the pumpkin. So this is basically all that you're going to be doing at the sewing machine, because everything else is now hand sewing and stuffing. So we'll go ahead and get to that step. So the next phase is just stuffing the pumpkin, and you can use whatever polyfill that you want. I've got the regular polyfill that we're all familiar with, but then I have the Martelli fiber fill, and it just, I've done like this one here. It just does a wonderful job of stuffing and filling out all the spaces. It's very smooth, and it just has a little bit of a weight to it. The polyfill is a little bit lighter, and I noticed that when I stuffed my large pumpkin with the polyfill, it kind of gave it more of a squattier look to it, even though it's the exact same template. So I was just so surprised to see the difference in the look. Maybe I did a deeper seam allowance with this one. I can't quite understand why we had a different look. But my recommendation would be go with a little bit and just start filling, because you want to push out and fill in all of these edges as you're going along, because remember there's also this other little curve that's up here on the top. So fill it in, stuff it in, and just remember to pull some in. I try not to get too much into this very center right here until I'm closer towards the end. I get all of the legs of the pumpkin filled out first as much as I can, being sure I just take the time to pop it in there and just keep push it so I get all those curves all pushed out. And then when I'm about ready to fill in the center, then I put some in there, but I don't like to fill in the center that much because I have to run a needle through it and coming back up. So I don't put a whole lot in the very center. I focus more on pushing everything out through all of the edges. And Linda, do you want to go ahead and talk about the other way to do the pumpkin?
Let's finish up here, and then we'll kind of look at the decorations, talk about the button, and then I'm going to show a couple options because you know me.
We'll go that. All right, so then once you get it all stuffed and filled, the next step would be to try to close in some of this opening right here. And that's where I recommend having a needle and thread. And I actually had got some stronger thread than just regular cotton thread. This is, I believe it's a polyester. This is actually upholstery thread. It's just really super strong. So I've been using the upholstery set thread to sew up these, because what I need to do is I got a smaller needle first, and I'm stitching up this closing in this area. So I'm closing it in here, I'm closing it in here, and I'm keeping all of it in. Now here's a hint. I use a really long piece of thread, not just a little piece, because what I'm going to do with my really long piece of thread, after I've kind of closed in the gap some, not all the way, but I've closed in the gap some, then I'm taking it after I've got my last stitch, then I'm changing out the needle, and I'm attaching now my big, huge needle to it. And I'm using what is called a doll maker's needle. This one is 5 inches. They can even come longer. And what I loved about this long needle is when I have got it changed out my thread, I put the thread now onto this one. I'm taking this needle and I'm running it through to the bottom. And I'm not going to be having to be searching for that needle, because it's long enough that I can still have my hands on it and it's out on the other end. So I've got that thread still attached to it. I'm pulling it out. Now I've got my button that's going down here on the bottom. So doesn't matter what button. I would have preferred if it would just had 2 holes in it, but I got a 4 hole. So I've got it going through the button, and then I come back up all the way up through the other side. Then I kind of pull it a little tight, but I go back down. Now I'm looking for the other side of the button coming out. Now I'm pulling it real tight. When I'm pulling it tight, it's going to take it and it's going to draw it into itself. It's kind of giving it this, this puckered look right here. I'm giving it a nice tight pull. And then I take it and I just wrap it around. When I have it all tucked into the way I want it to be, I wrap it around that button. Then I cut the thread, and then I'm adding a bead of hot glue to hold it all in place. So then once that's all done, now I just have this opening right here, a little opening, but my button's already done. I'm done with my sewing. So the next step is now I'm going to start filling it with my stem in here. I'm going to have my hot glue going on here, and then Linda, go in here. Let's talk about some of all the other options that we have, because just, this is a, craft maker's paradise.
Yeah.
If you have lots of doodads and decorations that you could decorate with, this is one of those amazing projects to do.
So all you need to do is go to your room where you've got all that stuff for the fall. We've got orange here. So we're going to look at fall things first. So these are those leaves. These are just the silk leaves, even Dollar Tree leaves. All of this is Spanish moss. We've got over here the raffia. I want you to see all the different ways, the cute little beads. All you have to do is just hit one of your stores if you don't have this stuff at home, and they're going to be doing all this stuff on sale. So look for those things on sale that you think might look nice.
And we have those tracing templates too, that are the oak leaves and the fall leaves. You could have easily had, made your leaves with those templates too.
And the tracing leaves, if you'll sew 2 of those together, wrong sides together, even put a piece of batting in there, I think would really look nice. So I said fall, but then Lisa came up with the idea of doing a winter wonderland kind of a thing. Squash, pumpkins, all those things are not just fall, but winter.
Yeah, a pumpkin is a fall winter squash. I mean, you can get them all winter long. So why do we have to just use pumpkins only for Thanksgiving and Halloween? Yeah. I mean, there's beautiful white pumpkins, so that's what we did the Christmas themed one.
So Lisa grabbed her Christmas stuff, and this was just some of what she pulled. There's more here. You can see there's little beads. We thought the silver would be really pretty on the white. One of the smaller ones, we thought something like this would look really good. So you go to town with whatever it is you have. So I'm going to get some of this stuff out of the way, and we'll pull over this one.
Did you see this one? This one
I showed that
done.
A little bit. Talk about that.
This one was just this was an older pieces of decoration that I have, and so it's being recycled. And then Linda was the one that said, why don't we use cinnamon sticks? So now it's going to smell nice. This would be great at your on your mantle. This would be great at the foot of your fireplace. Don't
I
get it too
made-
close to real fire. But yeah, this would just be just a real pretty decoration that you could have that's, and you could do in any color, but I really like to have it this
I
white
do
ones
too.
here.
My mother gave me a wheelbarrow that I used. It's a smaller wheelbarrow, kind of a neat one to put on the front door. And I had pumpkins that I had stuffed on the front door. It was a
There
really
you go.
nice kind of a welcome, to my home, that kind of thing. All right, so back to this guy here. So we've got this light color. Let's grab that one and pull out your poinsettia that we have. We thought this would look really neat too. So,
So we're going to do
that
this
on top of
poinsettia,
there.
and we're going to do, we could do the fabric one, but wouldn't a cork look really cool on this?
So what I thought, if you have a wine drinker, that really loves wine, you can do 2 of these. I like the
glued.
2 longer. You glue them together. Those are plain, but if it is somebody that really loves a particular wine, then you get their favorite wine. I'll glue in the plain one first. That goes in so that this one sticks out. So
Pretty
you
is
can
that?
see that.
Or
of course, for the
cinnamon sticks is perfect for this.
and of course, for the sewer, I want to grab all the old spools. These are a little bit too big, but if I had those further in on maybe the medium size,
Maybe
I
two of
have these
these.
2 small ones. If you want to have the label showing, you can see those are kind of a good size. So you decide how you want to embellish. I want to pull this back because Lisa said don't stuff this too much. Don't sew this up too much. I made pumpkins last year before we had this template, and boy, did I sew these tight. And when it came time to stick these inside, I couldn't get them in there. I had to unsew. I don't want to do that. So you be creative.
And you could
all of
even
those
just glue
options.
this. If you wanted to just glue this all together and then put the big blob of glue down there and just kind of hold it in there, it will hold in itself. I mean, it's however you want to finish it, because if you're going to decorate the top of it, it's not going to be
It's covering
seen
up
anyway. And if somebody's going to sit there and inspect and say, I didn't sew that, that's not a great friend.
And I'd say to them, make your own pumpkin.
Yeah, make your own pumpkin. So you can, it's however you want to finish it. But it was very important to keep that 1 inch before you start so that you don't close up your hole too small, because you've got to get your fingers in there to get it fully stuffed. But
So Lisa talked about white and that winter wonderland kind of thing. And I had this stuff. Now, I didn't make a pumpkin, but I'm going to make a pumpkin. Look, can you see the texture? This feels so good. And imagine a pumpkin with this kind of a layer to it, with all those seams. I think would be really pretty, and it would just feel wonderful. So you can play around with all the
that
colors.
Stitch and Steam product would be good with this.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then I started thinking about some of
Look
the
at
other
this,
pumpkins
guys.
that
I
I've done
wanted
in
you
the
to see
back.
this.
In the past, I did the wrong edges together. So let me grab this one. Now, I do recommend that you get a fabric that the front and the back are the same. So a batik, some of they're not flannels, but the flannel shirts that we wear, it's pretty much the front is the outside, the front and the back, the inside and the outside are the same. Because when you sew these raw edges together, if I were to ruffle this up, to chenille this up, let me show you the one that I did. Do you see here, I snipped here. Over here, though, I did pinking shears. If I did this and I really roughed it up, this inside is going to show. It's not that big of a deal, and it might actually add some dimension and texture, but I do want to think through that process. You can see on here, I did the pinking blade, and these are all stitched together. Let me show you how to stitch, because just like with Lisa, you'll have a boo-boo if you're not careful. So we're going to stitch with the thinner part. That's the top to the bottom, the top to the bottom. When you get to this, though, so we're sewing 2, let me grab this one. We're sewing these guys wrong sides together.
Yeah, that's opposite. Everything's wrong sides together here.
And notice here, I didn't pink. What you want to do before you sew it, where are the pinking shears?
Right here.
The pinking blades. We want to, before we sew this on, to snip, snip, snip. Why? It's a whole lot easier to pink now than it is to pink later.
You want to go to the sewing machine and sew this last one?
Well,
over
I
there?
just want to show them. I think they'll get
Okay.
the idea. We can do it if you want to. I do it a little bit differently than you. I like your method better. But what I ended up doing, because this is the outer and this is the inner, I want to make sure that when I stitch this, that I'm doing all my raws.
Yeah.
I did this, and I didn't like that look. It just gave me a raw that was rough and then a finish, and it was inconsistent. So I say, if
But
you're going
I
to
think
go,
it would look good that way too, where the end part, where it would be raw here, but then you would have that finished stitch here. I think it would work that way too, but if you wanted to be consistent, do it the same all
And
the
for
way
me,
through.
I say if you're going to go all the way. So I did do raw and then finished, raw and finished, and I ended up taking it
Take it
out
apart.
because I didn't like it. It didn't look as good. So we're going to again look at the thinner versus the fatter, the top versus the bottom. And I started stitching. This is the end piece. So we've got kind of the outer and the inner, and you're going to stitch that down.
And I would do it in
and then
like
do
at
it
least
here.
3/8
Yeah,
to a
if
half
you
inch because
look-
you're going to be trimming it a little bit.
Yeah, do you see how wide my seam allowance is there? So I've got a much wider seam allowance that gives me a little bit of room to play with it. The other thing too, Lisa did a button, so I'm a cheater. I don't always do the hand stitching when I don't have to. If I'm going to do these guys here and I'm going to add some raffia and I'm going to add some, leaves or whatever it is, I can stick that in there. And for the bottom, you can see my bottom is kind of coming together. I would take a button, grab me a button.
Yeah.
And instead of the needle and thread, I would hot glue that right down there. Okay,
If you
I
want to have
don't
that.
need to pull this through on all these. I like that this one is tall and this one is a little bit
Nice
shorter.
body.
You know, what that gives me is some dimension. I can have these 3 pumpkins out
Yep.
and these 2 don't look alike. I
No
can
button on
swap
this
it.
one,
Yeah,
so it gives
exactly.
it a different look than the other ones that does have a button. So which I think it's this one right here. This one's squattier. So just gives it a
So-
different look on what you want to do.
So you decide what you want to do. Again, like everything else that we do here at Martelli, we want you to put your twist on it. That's the fun with all of this. And having the 3 different sizes allows you to really play. Doing the 3 here, I only have 1, 2, 3. And then this, where'd my other one go? Anyway, there were
here.
4. Oh, right
So
there.
she's just gonna do
So
4.
I was going to do a 4. And I think it would be kind of neat for you all to see this. So I probably should have stitched it. But you can imagine that 4 pumpkin, he's going to be taller,
taller.
rather than wider.
Slimmer.
And I think that sitting next to this guy would look kind of neat. So I think you can have a whole lot of fun with this.
We hope you enjoyed this video. We had a great time showing you how to make stuffed pumpkins and giving you lots of options. Head over to martellinotions.com to find your stuffed pumpkin template set.
And if you have any questions, be sure to email me at quiltingwithlisa@gmail.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.